Basically, I think the idea of this session is to try and set the pace. Of course, it's a leaders session to the extent of, I think, Honorable Owalo, the Minister of ICT for Kenya, kind of led the context around both the convergence and the controversies that we're experiencing on our continent. A continent that is more divided, that needs to be more connected, a continent that still requires a lot to do around digital infrastructure, even beyond digital public infrastructure. A continent that has its own realities, that has basically been recovering, whether from the ravages of war, but also a country that is within its own geopolitical challenges amidst a global expansion of technology, where we are nowhere in the AI race. And so based on those particular challenges, let me start from the ministers in country as we go to the region. And because South Sudan, you have the mic. I mean, looking at unique situation of South Sudan around post-conflict recovery, what are the specific steps that your government is taking to enhance connectivity, especially in the bigger areas of education?
Yeah, thank you very much,
Ambassador Tigo.
MC. And thank you for the colleagues who are here with me, and I appreciate the presence of the audience for attending this occasion. In fact, South Sudan is one of the countries, of course, which is the youngest son of Africa, or child of Africa. And being the youngest child of Africa, of course, we don't expect it to make the same strides that it had, that other countries or states have made in Africa. And especially after independence, when we had some internal feuds that brought about insecurity in South Sudan, we could not make long strides as expected. We had started better in, when we got our independence in 2011, and after 2011, we continued and we progressed very well. Unfortunately, we had another situation in 2013, whereby we had insecurity, and with the insecurity, we could not move ahead. All that we had done was completely erased, and we had to start from afresh. Nevertheless, we managed to sign a peace agreement in 2018, which we are implementing now. With the implementation, of course, when South Sudan became independent, it had nothing actually to mention. There were Sudanese operators operating in South Sudan, and when the independence came, they all withdrew, and South Sudan was left without. So we had to start from scratch, and up to now, we are still struggling in order to catch up with the world, because with this connectivity and the technology, definitely you will not be in a position to proceed or do anything unless you catch up with the world. So, Excellencies, indeed, of course, the technology today is the leading catalyst. There is nowhere we can develop without, as mentioned by former speakers, it is only through technology that you can advance. And this is what we are struggling with. So in South Sudan, we have 3 operators. That is ICT operators, and that is MTN and Zain, and MTN, Zain, and Digital. These are the only 3 operators that is in South Sudan. And these 3 operators have not so far managed even to cover the whole of South Sudan. Of course, these are private companies, and they operate only whenever there are resources there. But so their task is to ensure that they make funds, they make money. Meanwhile, the policy of the government is to ensure that the services reach the people, because connectivity is a right at present. It is no longer a privilege, but a right of a citizen. So we are actually trying our level best to establish or to connect the people of South Sudan. And in order to do that, we have established what we call Universal Service and Access Fund. This fund, this body is established in order to accelerate the connectivity in the unserved and underserved areas in South Sudan. This is what this body is doing, and it is actually moving in a good way, and we are optimistic that we will be in a position to cover most of South Sudan before elections, but yeah, that is before the end of this year. In the Republic of South Sudan, of course, as I mentioned, we have only three operators who are trying to connect it, but nevertheless, we have also only 2 lines of fiber optic normally from Uganda to Juba. And the fiber optic is stopped there. We have not gone anywhere else. So our connectivity is still weak. It's still weak. We are not fully connected. Even the fiber optic that entered Juba has not yet covered Juba as such. So we are also in that process, and we are optimistic that we'll be in a position to do all this before time. However, the government has the government, in partnership with the International Development Association and the World Bank Group, is implementing a national broadband backbone of South Sudan. That is, in fact, this project starts from Kenya here. It started at the borders, and it enters South Sudan, and it is this project that will actually connect South Sudan with the world. This project, with the implementation of this project, we are planning to make South Sudan a hub for Africa, because South Sudan, being a country which is landlocked and it is in the heart of Africa, then we are planning to connect it through Kenya and through Uganda, through Ethiopia, and through Sudan. After connecting it like that, then we will create that hub and then extend westwards to DRC and to Central Africa, whereby we'll be connecting also to the Atlantic Ocean. These are programs that we are intending to do, and this is what we are planning. And in terms of policies, we have worked out our policies, and these policies are now we are in the process of operationalizing them. Our policy is a free market economy, so we have allocated, our duty is only to regulate the task of the operators so that they can operate in a free and a free atmosphere, so in order to render services to the people. So in addition to that, of course, our policy as a government is to ensure that the women and youth are the main beneficiaries of the digital connectivity and the digital world. This is simply because about 70% of the population in South Sudan are young people. This is a young nation with young people. Most of the people died in the liberation struggle, and the young ones who are now coming up, about 70% of them are the ones who are now in charge, and these are the people we are trying to develop so that they can take over the lead and be in a position to connect us with the world. Of course, in order to operationalize the policy of taking towns to the people, which is the policy which we had since the time of liberation, was taking towns to the people. We shall seek to accelerate the construction of the other phases of the national broadband backbone to be completed so that the benefits of the broadband connectivity do not stop in urban centers, but it should traverse the entire landscape of South Sudan, being aware that connectivity alone is of little benefit. So we shall also strive to work with local and global partners to complete the e-government, e-services, e-content, and mobile financial services across South Sudan. In fact, we have already started these e-services, and we have now the e-customs, the e-health, and we are in the process of establishing e-education and so forth. And this is in order to connect us with the rural population so that our people can benefit from that. However, the impact of connectivity on the environment is also massive, and the potential to help prevent climate change is great. In the future, digital technology may help abate carbon emissions by much more than it will generate by its deployment. Because of the digital divide, many people are still unable to benefit from connectivity and digital technologies. All in all, the positive impact is enormous and exceeds the negative impacts. Ultimately, connectivity has the potential to create benefits in every field of sustainable development, and it's imperative that we embrace the overall benefits of the digital technology. This is the situation in which we are in South Sudan. The operators that are operating now have not yet connected us up to, the connection is about 50% only in South Sudan. And we are optimistic that we'll be in a position to connect them up to connect the people of South Sudan up to more than half, 60, 70%. And we are encouraging more investment because South Sudan is a fertile land where connectivity is still open, and we would encourage investors to come to South Sudan so that they can come and help in accelerating this digital connectivity. That is what I can say. We are a little bit behind. We are not like our brothers in Kenya, but we are longing for your support as Kenya so that we connect with South Sudan. Thank you.
Please, you can give a hand to the Honorable Minister. I think you sort of covered a wide scope in terms of your vision, and I think the vision around, and this is always to private sector, that connectivity should not necessarily be to areas where it's lucrative or areas that make you money. But I think it's to the extent, as the Honorable Minister says, that connectivity now is actually a human right. And so you can actually do good while doing business. And so I would, again, just amplify and echo your call that South Sudan is open for business. You've had the gaps. It's only 3 operators. The coverage is still not adequate in terms of mobile connectivity, and fiber optics is still, again, at only the capital centers. It needs to go across South Sudan. And so, again, to all private sector in the room, I cannot amplify it even better than the minister has done it. He'll be around at Connected, so please find the minister. Let me go quickly to Honorable Paula. And I just wanted to get the segue. Of course, not lost to, again, thank you for coming. This month is especially significant to Rwanda because of the genocide against the Tutsis. And so, as always, we stand in solidarity with Rwanda. But again, I just wanted to bring Rwanda because so that our Honorable Minister from South Sudan sees what is possible and to the extent of what Rwanda has done in terms of being a leader in just not necessarily building a technology infrastructure, but also enabling technology to serve people and technology to be the driver of what we know Rwanda is. So when you see Visit Rwanda, you basically know what the president, Honorable Kagame, has done, but also what the minister has been able to do. So I think if you can share some insights around Rwanda's digital public services. I know I'm one of the people who's used Irembo. Sophia has caught me, or my friends, driving, over speeding. And to the extent, what lessons can we learn? And what potential advice can you start to share with South Sudan? Because over 30 years, you've been able to do what some of us think is impossible. So my question really is, what are those lessons that you can give us? What are those exemplars? And what do you think we can scale collectively to learn from Rwanda?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Philip, and maybe allow me to also extend my appreciation to the government of Kenya for inviting us to be part of Connected Africa Summit. Definitely a great space where we can all share what has worked, what hasn't worked for the different countries, but also as we look at what's the best way to integrate better and ensure that we're leaving no one behind in the different parts of our countries. But just to go quickly to your question, Rwanda's journey, as you rightly said, has been one of 30 years where we put digital front and center of the different strategies that we adopted, understanding that digital was going to really allow Rwanda to leapfrog the different stages of development. And that has worked for us because of the investments in infrastructure, whether it's the investments that have been possible by the many partnerships we have, whether it's development partners, whether it's the telecom operators that we have within our market, that have all invested heavily to really allow us to even achieve today what we boast at about more than 97% geographic coverage. But I think when you look just at the statistics of coverage, that may not really be enough. What we're looking at is not just how many people or how many places in the country have been fully covered, but truly how many people in the country, the population, that is benefiting from these investments that have been made. And that's why, whether it's ITU or GSMA, we see a distinction of statistics between the coverage gap and the usage gap. And I believe COVID was a great opportunity for many governments and the private sector together to really reset and understand that much as we've invested heavily in putting in place, in closing the infrastructure gaps, there's still many of our people that live in areas that are very well covered, but at the same time that are not benefiting in a meaningful manner. And that brings me to the question that the moderator is asking of public services, because for us it was not just rolling out fiber infrastructure in all districts and border points. It was also going back to the drawing board and understanding then what? That now we have the infrastructure, what does it mean for people in different parts of the country? And that's why digitizing services was a priority for us as the government of Rwanda. And for us, the policy was simple: zero trip, zero paper. We don't want our citizens to make any trip to get any government service, and we don't want them to have to print papers to upload documents, but just to find ways of even delivering these services in an e-certificate form. So today we have over 400 services that are already online. The plan is that by June this year, all government services will be online. And as I said, citizens don't have to travel to any government office to get a service. All they need to do is log into Irembo, as Ambassador Philip mentioned. You go in, you put in all the different documents that you're requested for, and within 3 or 5 days, you're able to get the services that you're looking for. And that has been an interesting journey for us. But coming back to the issue of the infrastructure gap, we're also very aware that much as we've put services online and we have internet connectivity in most parts of the country, there's still going to be a big percentage of our population that still will not be able to access these services. And that comes back to the question of devices. Most of our citizens will have future phones or basic phones, and that means that they're limited in how much they can meaningfully benefit from the infrastructure and broadband infrastructure investments that have been made, or the investments that government and the private sector have made in really putting services online. And this brings me to the concept of agents. And I think even for Kenya and many countries that will speak here, that are represented here, we know how much the agent networks have grown in a way to facilitate the last mile delivery of these services. And so a combination of agents of our telecom operators and a combination of our digital ambassadors has made it possible for those citizens that still live in areas that are well covered but don't have the right device to still be able to access these services. And you may ask, and perhaps we'll end on this, what is digital ambassadors? Because that's also another segment that has been very important for the drive for digital adoption in Rwanda. And the digital ambassadors will help with building digital literacy skills for our citizens. And so the combination of investments in broadband infrastructure, investments in skilling our citizens with digital literacy skills, thinking about how we provide affordable devices, smart devices for our citizens, and digitizing services is really what has made it possible for Rwanda to push hard on the digital agenda and making sure that every Rwandan is fully benefiting from these investments. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Honorable Minister. And I think I really needed to connect that with South Sudan. Because to the extent that, from where Rwanda came from, it's actually possible to do this. But also, technology has evolved. I think partnerships and collaborations are much more nimble. They're very much aware of context. And so, to your point, Honorable Minister from South Sudan, that acceleration is possible. And beyond acceleration, there's also good practice that we can learn from our neighbors. Let me go to Sierra Leone, the other side of the continent. I think there's again similar. I'll ask you the same question I asked Paula, because I know Sierra Leone also has come from a difficult history, but then you've been a North Star in that region from DSTI, right? Which Kenya normally is a first for everything, but all of a sudden, Minister Senge puts up an innovative office that then begins to drive technology. It's for the first time I ever saw an African president with a 3D printed map on education and looking at using 3D to understand disparities between boys and girls in school. And so with that kind of mindset, what is Sierra Leone pushing beyond those initial initiatives that we saw, to the extent of building a resilient infrastructure, but also that is looking at its inclusivity? Because I know that has been President Bio's kind of mantra. So how are you doing it, and what can we learn from Sierra Leone?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And let me join colleague ministers to thank the government of Kenya for hosting this event and inviting us. I think specifically when it comes to tech and connectivity, I think this is one area where, as a region, we really need to come together, learn lessons, and see how we can collaborate. But going to your question that you asked in terms of Sierra Leone's journey and how, as a country of an 8 million population, we've been really able to make a stake in terms of our contribution to this. I think it really stems from, I think maybe similar to what Rwanda experienced, realizing the only way we're going to accelerate and leapfrog our development was through tech. And I think also understanding that because we didn't have some legacy systems, it will be much more easier for us to adapt some of these. And it's been a very intentional development, as you mentioned, from even the appointment of the Chief Innovation Officer, Dr. Senge, the establishment of DSDI, all of those were first of its kind, because I think sometimes it's easy to say we're going to prioritize tech, but if you don't set up the institutions that would allow you to do that, it would become very difficult. So through the gains which were made through those appointments, through DSDI, and I will also say a lot of the cornerstones, and I actually come from the world of DSTI. So a lot of the cornerstones was really looking at 3 areas which we prioritize. We prioritize data for decision making, which is where you would see His Excellency the President had a 3D map to tell him in terms of looking at children going to school, which were the hard to reach areas, which kind of informed key interventions that we made. also, we looked at human-centered design. So when you talk about inclusivity, those are really key for us because we understood that we could not just roll out the most high-tech solutions and technologies that you wanted. You have to think about the context and where you sit. So this is why you see so much of our solutions are hybrid. We have the low-tech, not because we can't or we shouldn't, we don't know how to do the high-tech, but we understand that our population is not at that stage yet, looking at the coverage for feature phones, looking at what the literacy rates are. All of those are decisions that go into, or factors that go into in terms of determining what kinds of solutions that we build. And that's really worked well for us. I'll give you an example. During COVID, and because we unfortunately had the experience of Ebola, we understood that a lot of the impact that we faced was because of the lack of communication, effective communication. So when we had the experience, when COVID came around, we utilized the various technologies to ensure that we could deliver accurate information to citizens. We used IVR that we used within the 16 different languages to make sure citizens could access the information. We used chat box, we used USSD, you know, and we really saw through that the impact. I think Sierra Leone was one of the last 3 countries to report a COVID case, and we really tie that to our communication strategy that we used. So through all these wins, and also even if you talk about using USSD to do result checker, I'm sure most countries which have the WASCE module of examination, we had this situation where for students to access their results, there was this scratch card system where it was costing students, guardians a huge amount of money to be able to access that. We were able to digitize that using USSD, basic USSD for students to check their results, and up to date, we've calculated it saved over $5 million in terms of direct impact to students and guardians. And through the significant interventions Dr. Senge made when he eventually transitioned to Ministry of Education, actually, so all of those gains, we decided His Excellency decided to scale up this to a ministerial level. Even the establishment of my ministry is new. It was really, before it was information and communication, but we realized for us to do more, there has to be a specific intention around prioritizing tech. So also during the new administration, tech and infrastructure is one of the president's big 5 agendas. And even though it's a separate pillar, but actually when you look right across the other priorities of the government, food security, public sector reform, human capital development, tech runs through all of them. And I sometimes tease my colleague ministers that I'm the most important one out of all of them because I appear in all of their portfolios. But that is really to say about really just being intentional about centralizing tech and really just, again, we do a lot in terms of looking at countries that have done a lot in terms of this and seeing how we adapt and we pick and we adapt what would work best for us. But then to go back to it in terms of now what are our new priority areas for us, really we have 2. We focus on infrastructure development, that is increasing penetration within the country, and we focus on affordability. Because we understand for a lot of this, when we talk about digital services, government services, and so much which runs across critical infrastructure sectors, finance, agriculture, banking, security, a lot of this rests on infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure being reliable. So we've rolled out a national fiber backbone, which covers the whole country right now. And we're now in engagements with private sector to see how they can leverage off that infrastructure to do last mile connectivity. Currently, 90% of the population has access to 2G. That's not the ideal of where we want to be. So we look at what else we need to do in terms of moving that forward. So a lot of the focus is on increasing, I think as the Minister of South Sudan said, same for us. We consider, I think that's the critical thing, really when you start considering internet and mobile services as a basic human right, it really changes the focus because I always say, I remember the days, well, I'm not not coming from far, but remember when, having internet at your home was really seen as a luxury item across our countries. So you really want to move to that point where we all see it as a point where everybody should have access, like how you have access to healthcare, water, food, you should have access to mobile and internet, and it's not an afterthought. So those are the areas we're making in terms of infrastructure. But I also think in terms of affordability, and I think that's another area where we need to focus on, because maybe as the minister was mentioning, Paula was mentioning, we have our coverage and our uptake. There's a gap within that, and some of it we see it's around affordability, affordability of those services. So I think those are areas where individual countries need to look at, but I think across the region, I think is something we need to look at. So one of the things we're doing to that is to really maybe address some of the root causes that contribute to the high cost of internet. For example, we're discussing with our private sector how we get them to all move over to green energy, because sometimes we recognize that some of the things that impact our pricing is cost of fuel. The recent cost of energy across the region kind of also impacts our cost of providing those services. So we're discussing with it. One of the company that manages wet landing cable is completely 100% on green energy. We're looking to see how we do more of those in terms of moving the other private sector companies to also move within that. And I think just finally, one of our areas that we're really also prioritizing is citizens' engagement. Having a conversation with the private sector within our country, and also engaging with citizens, I believe, and I've engaged with a couple of countries, and I think there's a general perception about this sector and being very extractive, and sometimes seemingly with our citizens not understanding why. Again, it has to do with cost, it has to do with quality of service. So one of the areas which we're really prioritizing is how we do citizens engagement, first of all, in terms of understanding the infrastructure, what it costs, but also getting feedback from citizens in terms of what we can do better. So those are some of the priority areas that we have in terms of moving those along.
Thanks so much, Minister. Quite a wide kaleidoscope, of course. But I think the takeaway for me is the issue of infrastructure, the issue of affordability, issues of meeting citizens where they are, especially around devices. Thinking through is not the shiny smartphones, it's also understanding that citizens have feature phones and ensuring that services can be accessed. Those feature phones, let me go quickly to Zimbabwe. I'm being reminded we are running out of time. But basically, again, how is Zimbabwe, attempting to bridge the digital divide, but also figuring out the challenges that you've had from your previous speakers on the infrastructure, and what examples can we learn?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Indeed, let me also thank Kenyan government and also our Counter Minister, who is Honorable Olo, for organizing this very important conversation. And you know very well, we always say there is nothing for us without us. So we believe that we need to be involved in these conversations so that we're able to make sure that we enhance the digital landscape of Africa. As Zimbabwe, we really want to really speak about some of the interventions that we have done in terms of the digital space. For us as a country, we have got a mobile penetration rate of about 99%. And of course, the internet penetration rate has increased at the last quarter of 2023 to get to about 73%. But for us, we still feel it's not enough. When we talk about infrastructure as Zimbabwe, we have realized that there is great need for us to enhance in terms of increasing our fiber connectivity. For us, we are very much basing on it, but we have also realized that we have connected more than 20,000 kilometers of fiber across the country. But right now, with, of course, a lot of talk coming around, we have also realized that there is need for us to look for innovative ways for us to be able to connect. As a country, we have seen ourselves move greatly in also looking at innovations that we also see the young people also getting involved. We have come up with innovation hubs, which has seen us also coming up with the startup policy, which resides, of course, in the Science and Technology Ministry. But we have seen that as Zimbabwe, we have got technology hubs, which we greatly look at, and we are also looking at looking at these innovations and also commercializing them. As a country as well, we have also seen ourselves also look at a shared infrastructure policy. The reason why we have done that, we've realized that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So if it means that we've got a company that is already established a base station in terms of connectivity, we tap onto it, other telecoms operators also tap onto it, and they utilize it together. We have realized that it is important because, after all, there is a lot of investment that is needed in the sector. So if one is going to invest in that, that means that others can actually be able to tap on it. As a country as well, we have also been seen also looking at us introducing public Wi-Fi zones, not only to just make sure that at least we also look at public institutions. We are able to do this for our schools. We've got an e-learning program that we have, and also we have got a telemedicine program that we've already started. And now we have realized that we need to connect every other plan. We want to thank our President, His Excellency Dr. Idi Mnangagwa, on the 7th of March, just last month. He launched 3 ICT policies. He launched the Smart Zimbabwe Master Plan, which is seeing us in coming up with ways that are going to make us go smart. For us as Zimbabwe, we are very happy that our president has been very supportive in making sure that we go smart. We also look at us and making sure that we digitalize our operations. We also are working on an enterprise architectural modeling that we're working together with Estonia, which is going to see us digitize all public institutions. We realize that a lot of ministry have been very much lacking, and it is quite important for us to digitalize them and also see us make sure that we enhance our connectivity. We also enhance even us as public institutions also being seen to lead from the front. We have also engaged on public sector interactions, which we have seen that it is quite important that they also lead, they also assist us in also coming up with this. There is great need for us to enhance, of course, on our national data center. We feel that there is great need for us to enhance more so that at least we can then be able to make sure that at least we have got more cloud computing services that we provide as a nation. And I'm happy that COMESA recently came to Zimbabwe on part of their tour, whereby they're also trying to identify an Africa cloud. And we're saying this is the way to go. For us to be able to enhance as Africa, it's a matter of us realizing where we are lacking, what is it that is needed so that we enhance more. And I'm very happy that this conversation is very important because, after all, we don't need to say, yes, if Rwanda has got an AI policy, why can't we tap on it? We need to be able to also listen to what they're doing, to also follow suit to what they're doing so that we enhance more. As Zimbabwe, we have already come up with an artificial intelligence framework, which already we're working on so that at least we can then be able to come up with an artificial intelligence policy. We feel that this is great need. All these disruptive technologies are upon us. What we need to do is also to tap on them, what is it that we're doing. On our curriculum as Zimbabwe, we have also incorporated robotics and coding, so that it starts at an early age. And these are some of the interventions that we're also doing. However, as Zimbabwe, we launched a geospatial planning satellite 2 years ago. And we are happy to say that we are also trying to also then be able to come up with the communication satellites. Plans are already underway. But there was a conversation which was being said to say, as Africa, where are we in terms of satellite technology? Why can't we also be able to be seen coming up with our own satellite from Africa? Why can't we also be able to do this? And I'm happy that indeed there are conversations around this that we need to do. But I continuously say we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to be able to see ourselves, be able to invest in that. And in conclusion, I'm saying, as Zimbabwe, we are not yet there, but we're continuously pushing. We also have got interventions that we're doing in terms of device mechanisms, whereby we've got a company that is assembling devices. We feel that the cost of devices is very, very important for us to be able to move greatly. And also, we're also getting interventions because we're a landlocked country on seeing how best we can be able to make sure that we get the cost of our data very cheap. But all these interventions, they're meant to make sure that we digitalize. And indeed, we also followed suit from Rwanda. They've got a Connect Rwanda, but in Zimbabwe, we now have a digitalized Zimbabwe, so that at least we can make sure that we digitalize Zimbabwe to a great level.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I think clap for the Honorable Minister. I think that mantra will carry nothing for us without us. we will take it and explore it in the conference. But I think the very notion that there's already existing best practice, or why we're reinventing the wheel when there's already good practice, and I think that's the essence of connected Africa. This is how we remain connected, but also this is our context. And I think our context is where we learn better, but also I think there's definitely an appetite for peer learning across countries. I think COMESA, you've been mentioned a couple of times, and maybe this is the opportunity to bring COMESA. Especially, for the first time, I'm hearing of an Africa Cloud, but potentially, what are the opportunities that COMESA offers? I know we are trying to do as much as possible in country, but then there's now the push for Africa to begin to trade with itself. And when Africa is beginning to trade itself, of course, we've had many countries that are really putting up big investments around digital infrastructure and digital connectivity, but there are challenges around cross-country connectivity. And so what is COMESA potentially looking at around trying to help us as much as we are doubling down on internal connectivity, cross-border connectivity?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Also, just to add my appreciation to the Kenyan government for making sure that COMESA is part of this very important conversation. I'm inspired by the fact that this session, which is thought leaders, is primarily made up of young women, Africans, who are leading ICT in their countries. And I think then our future is in safe hands. Secondly, I also am delighted to come to such a forum, because if we're going to talk about Africa connecting, working together, we have to meet and talk. We have to bring the ministers, the regulators, the policymakers, the regional bodies, private sector, so that we have a very clear narrative of where we want to go. The ecosystem, technology, digitalization is huge. There's so many threads that you can pick and say, we need to do this and this. I like to use two African adages. One is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I think this means that we really have to come together if we're going to get to where we're going. The second one that I use when I talk about something as huge as this is, how does one eat an elephant? One piece at a time. Which means we have to be deliberate in how we want to structure the way we go forward, the policy issues and all those, so that we are moving in a very clear narrative as what does Africa want to do? What are their priorities? How do they want to move in the whole system? Listening to the different countries, I would now talk from a regional perspective. Listening to the different countries, they all have their own peculiar needs, and they are addressing those issues. At the end of the day, what we're doing when we look at how can we use technology is really to resolve challenges that are faced. So we have to have impact. Whatever it is we're doing has to have impact on the ordinary citizen, make it easier for him to make a payment, make it easier for him to travel, to make a booking, whatever it is. So that has to be paramount in our thought process. But what we do as a regional body is that we have the mandate to convene ministers or regulators and say, come together, what do you think about this? It's happening in this part of Africa, can we replicate it here? So we have that mandate to bring the players together, especially the policymakers. So that puts us in a position where we can really address the issue of harmonization, which for me is very, very important. We must have a situation where we're moving in the same direction, where whatever platforms we're putting together can speak to each other, because we don't want to have different efforts at a different country level, which now when we try to bring them together, just brings us more complications, cost, so we can avoid duplication, we can be more efficient in the use of our technology, our resource, our money. And also, when we look at a very well thought out process, even attracting investment from private sector, they will come when they know this is seamless. I can invest across 3 countries, 4 countries, without having different rules that I'm dealing with. So for us, harmonization is very important. The second point that I'll touch on is alignment of strategies. Again, I've listened to some strategies from different countries. They're seeing it from their perspective. Is that perspective of the region, of the continent? So for us, again, is our national strategy aligned to the regional strategy, to the continental strategy? How does that feed in so that we don't have this misalignment, which will cost us more money to try and align? Let's do it at the planning stage. Let's do it before we roll out. The third one for me is really sustainability, because usually we do start on projects. This is really good, it's working, and we pat ourselves on the back and say this is something that is going to bring a lot of solutions. But if there's no sustainability built into those programs, you find after a year or two, the funding stops from the funders who had supported that particular program, and we're back to square one. So I think it's really important that we also look at sustainability. I'll talk a little bit about what COMESA is doing just to bring into the picture. For example, I'll take one aspect because our focus is trade. So for us, digital free trade area is what we have embarked on. So we are trying to look at how do we use technology to make your crossing on the border faster, more efficient. Instead of having a truck that comes and they have to offload, you use scanners. That saves them so much time. We use electronic documentation for your certificate of origin, for other documentation that you need to submit at the border, which actually you can pre-clear by sending that information. So before the truck actually gets to the border, information is already there and it's much faster. So again, leveraging on technology. Also, we talked about Africa Cloud, which I'm sure Zimbabwe has already talked about. But these are very practical ways that we are saying, how can we do this? Not individual countries, but coming together in grouping. So really, in short, that some of the things that we are trying to do is advance the harmonization, the coordination, the alignment, and making sure that we're not duplicating effort. And we're learning from those that are ahead so that we don't reinvent the wheel, as it has been said. So for me, really, those, usually when you're one of the last two speakers, you kind of, everybody had a lot of time, and then suddenly they told, in 5 minutes, can you give us what you... So I hope I haven't overstated my time and been able to make my point. Thank you, moderator.
Succinctly, very clear. Please give a hand, and my apologies for rushing it through speaking. But I think you speak on the critical aspect of interoperability. And I think for you, the interoperability is both systems and people. Because I think integration is just not software. It's actually Africans who are beginning to trade and getting increasingly young and looking at digital platforms as those capabilities that can begin to speak across borders and make money. Alessandra. Last but not least, the UK has been making heavy investments in Africa around technology. You recently held a UK AI Safety Summit. Just to give a context, Minister Paula and I were fortunate to have been at the UK AI Safety Summit, but also you made a lot of announcements around how the UK can work with African countries around digital transformation. Can you share some of your thoughts around why the UK is doing this, and what are these opportunities, and potentially how do you see your involvement in this new movement, as I call it, that is looking at making Africa more connected?
Amazing, and I'll try to be brief. Famous last words. So first of all, I'll be brief, but I have to absolutely say thank you again to the government of Kenya for inviting the UK to contribute to this fantastic conference. And I am personally really humbled to be on this panel with this. They are the thought leaders, right? And so it's really a privilege for me to be here. And I'm standing in for my ambassador, the High Commissioner Neil Wigan, British High Commissioner to Kenya. I am the head of digital development in the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK government, so it's quite fitting that I'm trying to kind of sit here to share with you our thoughts on digital development. First of all, we define digital development as the support to the inclusive, responsible, and sustainable digital transformation of our partner countries. And that sounds like a mouthful, I'm sure, but actually we've developed this policy framework, if I may say, over the years. And thanks actually to the partnership and collaboration with many African countries that we've been working with on the policy level or through programming or also through building partnerships and facilitating investment. So first key message I would say is that for us it's not just about digital technologies per se. Of course, we all know that they're useful. They also bring risks. So we need to have a sort of a holistic approach where we reap the benefits of digitalization. We see it as a real key enabler of social and economic development. And we call it the accelerator of the SDGs, and I'm sure my colleagues on the panel also maybe think a little bit like that. But we also know about the risks, and maybe we haven't mentioned the risks very much in this discussion. And so we really want to make sure that we address the risks as well. I'll say a couple of things about AI, because obviously Ambassador Figo and Minister Ingabire and others, sort of lots of different countries participate in the AI Safety Summit. That was a summit about frontier risks. So it was about trying to kind of future-proof what we do on digitalization as the world globally. We've become more and more interconnected, more and more interdependent. And with AI, whether we like it or not, this actually accelerates. So that was a great theme for the summit, but those of us who work in development in FCDO really pushed to also have some content of the summit that was related to looking at how AI can actually support development. And this is why our ministers there launched a new AI for Development program. I'll just only say very quickly on that it's a partnership with the US government, with Canada, and with the Gates Foundation. But importantly, it will be focusing on at least 10 African countries in partnership with them, deciding together with them how to employ the resources to do 4 main things. One is to basically establish or strengthen research labs for AI in African universities. Also build a computing capacity, strengthen high-end digital skills for AI, and importantly, also looking at the policy and regulatory frameworks for AI, not just for the individual countries or maybe at the regional level, to echo the colleague from COMESA, but also to think about the global stage. How can we work together with our African partners to make sure that they also have the voice that they deserve and that they should have in shaping AI in the international stage? And you can think about things like the Global Partnership for AI or the UN Global Digital Compact. There's no point us in the UK or in any other so-called digital development donor to sort of come up with positions. This needs to be for everybody to kind of shape it together. But there is a big but there, because in order to do all of that, we need to remember that AI is a digital technology fundamentally, so we need to continue to focus on the real kind of foundations, the underpinnings, the digital, what I call the building blocks of digitalization. So I'm so glad about the title of this conference, because Connected Africa really makes you think very hard about what is it that we need to do so that everybody can participate. And so circling back to the digital development strategy, and I'll also give a couple of practical examples later of projects so that it doesn't sound too theoretical, but I'll do what people do in talk shows. They go and show the book that they've written and try to kind of publicize it. So anyway, if you go anywhere online, just if you're curious about our approach and our plan for the next 7 years, 2024 to 2030, just type Digital Development Strategy UK, and it will come up on our GovUK website. So what we've done with that strategy, we have basically built on the experience and evidence that we've gathered, as I say, thanks also very much to the partnership with lots of African countries. We've done a lot of work, for example, through the Digital Access Program in countries like Kenya, of course, but also Nigeria, South Africa, and also countries outside of Africa, to really compare and contrast different models, exchange knowledge. And that program is actually, I always call it the incarnation of our strategy, because it has tested for 5 years an approach that brings together fundamental digital inclusion, so lots of emphasis on last mile connectivity, on basic digital literacy, but also obviously on enhancing access to digital content and services that really make sense for African population, so it has to be, as we call it, locally relevant. Then the second component of this program is around building that sort of trust and resilience in the ecosystem. As I was saying earlier on, there are lots of risks in the digital world, so we've been working with partner countries to build their own cybersecurity capacity, but also to enhance online safety, in particular for women and girls, who I'm afraid are unfortunately targeted more than other parts of the population. And we've also looked at data protection. So that's the whole bucket of what we call digital responsibility. And then finally, in the third pillar of the Digital Access Program, we've been enhancing the capacity for digital and tech entrepreneurship through a network of tech hubs that basically ensure that the kind of young innovators, and there are a lot of them in Africa for sure, coming up with fantastic digital solutions to address development challenges, to make sure that they not only can manage, sort of enhance their skills, not just technological skills, but also business skills, but also that they have a chance to get in touch with investors and get support and really kind of go from startup to scale up, as we say. So circling back to the strategy before I conclude, while the Digital Access Program has been like the testing ground for us to look at this kind of sort of integrated approach to digital development. When it came to draft the strategy, obviously we consulted very widely with our international partners, with our country partners, and we came up with the sort of policy framework that I alluded to, so digital inclusion, digital responsibility, digital sustainability to enhance digital transformation of the economy, government, and society. I should add that this last pillar of digital sustainability, that is something that digital development stakeholders, and I know there's plenty of those here in this room, have looked at maybe only in the last couple of years really seriously. And I see you nodding, thank you. So I always say last but not least when I explain this framework, because with digital sustainability, we need to be absolutely cognizant of the environmental cost. And I think the minister from South Sudan said it very well. You know, there is an environmental cost of connectivity, right? It is the physical infrastructure, it's the critical minerals, energy, but even generally speaking of the ICT sector, if you think about the difficulty with e-waste, safe e-waste management. So all of that needs to be mitigated. So if we together push for digitalization, we need to together try to find solutions that are environmentally friendly. And finally, looking at the positive side of the coin in digital sustainability, we consider how we can use digital technologies in different ways to enhance adaptation and resilience to climate change. That is another thing that together with economic and social development really affects all of us. And I would sort of conclude by saying that everything that I've said, basically, it's about the interdependence and interconnectedness that we have. So I sit here not being African and not being a thought leader, certainly, although I always do feel a bit African because I have worked and lived in this continent many, many years. But I feel completely connected and interdependent with the colleagues and with everybody sitting in the room. And I hope that the work that we do on digital development will help with that. It's a shared journey. And I hope that will be useful as a platform to collaborate and partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. Please give a hand to honorable ministers for their thought leadership, for the work that they're doing in their countries. But also I know they have a ministerial session that will go deeper into what they've shared.